All of you. Meet Taryn. Taryn's coming all the way from Lincoln. These are the group of Yorkshire business enterprise agents. Absolutely fantastic. How nice to see you. How was your morning thing? Did you go well?
Yeah, really, really. Looks too hot. Been working on your new jewellery. Okay.
Fantastic.
Hopefully I'll have a Friday.
I see you. You can't see the slides. So sit next to Tara. There's the new slides are a lot better than the speed. Can't see that. Well, you see how it's changed as well, which will be interesting. Yeah, it's nice. It'll have changed.
He's only got an hour.
You only got an hour, Tony? How can I fit in
I've given Mike, 15 minutes to go, 5 minutes to go, 1 minute
I'll
to
be
go.
like a shepherd's crook.
I'm
Shepherd's crook for his
You may get very confused. No, we've got to do it now because I'm doing pitching as well.
That's what I'm really interested in.
Right, I'll see you all in a minute.
Yeah. Like it hurt. Where's it at?
Sorry, Stan.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, do you think we should get a few wines?
No, you're right. Alright, we can have one. We'll have one after the building. It might be like that.
She's going to be admin from home type person.
Oh, yeah. So personal.
Assistant type. Oh, I've got a guy. Met him today. He's got a job he wants to hire a PA. Do we know anyone?
Yes, that woman who was the woman from the Yorkshire
Right,
Women in Business Network who was there once when I
I'm
went.
just going to make a start. So welcome to the
Hire a full-time one.
THUD Yorkshire, the hub of Yorkshire. So this is our sort of the first Monday. It's the first night of Global Entrepreneurship Week.
We need to hold it. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, everybody? Yes, but not if I do this. Right? You can't hear me. Right. So just talk into the microphone. Write it into the microphone. Hello. Oh, that's loud. Okay, so as I previously mentioned, today's the first day of Global Entrepreneurship Week and the first day of Global Entrepreneurship Week in Hull. So tonight we're going to have Tony Robinson over here. He's going to do a talk for an hour, and then we're going to have some food, and then we are going to have three young entrepreneurs do pitching. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Tony Robinson over here, the founder of Enterprise and Rocks and MicroBiz Matters there.
Thanks, Thomas. Great. Well, I'm delighted to be here in my home city of Hull. Oh, interesting. Frankly, at my age, I'm delighted to be anywhere. And what we're going to do is the Micro is Magic show. Now, I've got dyspraxia, so I lose things. If I fall over, don't worry about it. In fact, there's a character in Doctor Who who's got dyspraxia. Do you know what it is? I'm in the lowest 3% of spatial awareness. The good news for you is I've given up driving. So here we go then. Let's see if this works. Yay, there we go. So this is the Micro is Magic show. You can all read for yourselves. But what I'd like to do is start with a little prologue. And the reason I start with a little prologue is that I want you to understand what the show is about and also how we're going to manage the show as well. And my perfect idea for the show is to ensure that we end up with you having a visual idea of what the difference is between the Micro is Magic way of starting and running your own business and the American way of starting and running your own business. So I've got one or two little props, and I've got two assistants. I've got Gertie Good Habit, and I've got Bertie Bad Habit. Now they're not hares or rabbits, they're habits, and Bertie Bad Habit is going to represent the American way, and Gertie Good Habit is going to represent the Micro is Magic way. Why do I think this is important? Just going back a slide. Why do I think it's important that as many people in the UK starting and running their business know there is another way than the American way, which is what the government, large corporations, most academics are actually promoting the American way of starting and running business. And why do I actually believe it's very important to understand the Micro is Magic way? So I know it's very serious, but the point is that the American way will lead to 20% of startups surviving 3 years at maximum. There are some figures that actually say that 20% will only survive 18 months and 1 out of 10 will survive for 3 years. As against the Micro is Magic way, which obviously I've put together with over 20 years research, and the reason it says a cast of thousands is because I'm going to mention lots of people that have used the micro, this magic way to start and successfully run their own business. Because the point is, we're looking for 80% will actually survive 3 years by following the micro's magic way. Now, I know it's going to be really, really tough for me to be able to convince you of this because of charismatic individuals. Now, let's see if anybody can guess what the name of this person. Can anybody guess what the name of the person? Donald Trump, right? Well, that's absolutely right. And so we're putting a visual picture together already, aren't we? Because if there is one person that represents the American way of starting and running a business, it would be Donald Trump. And I put a book there as well to start it, which is The Magic of Thinking Big. Now, The Magic of Thinking Big came out in 1959. I got that book in 1984, and you'll find out why I got that book in 1984 a little bit later on. But basically, the whole of the self-help industry that we have in the UK is based on the American way of starting and running a business. If we were to make a pilgrimage to Silicon Valley, we'd find that we're actually, again, looking at the American way of starting and running a business. So what I'm going to do is in 3 acts, I'm going to actually show you why we are all fooled by, and let's think about Donald Trump for a second. So Donald Trump has built a 4.5 billion empire. He didn't start up with any of his own money. His father gave him, some would say, $1 million is what Donald Trump would say. Most other people think it was nearer 40 million to start up the business. And he changed the brand to Trump, and he's exceptionally successful. You must be to trash 15 other Republican candidates, yeah, to actually get even nominated. Now, you've got to remember that he's such a competitor and so believes in the American way of succeeding that he will think about me, and probably many of you, as losers. Because in America, winning is everything, and making the most amount of money is everything. And so basically, he actually got the nomination. He was doing it to become even more famous, because he regarded himself as a B-level celebrity in America. He'd done The Apprentice and various things for a number of times, and it was his aim to be like an opera at the end of the day, and to have his own TV channel in America. And obviously, he so loves winning, and he does all his own PR, that he actually made it to the top. But the key ingredient is that he would be called, as would anybody else in America, a major entrepreneur, because they've made lots of money. I actually think it's about creating something out of nothing, which most of us actually do, and it's about actually earning our own living, making ends meet out of our own enterprising endeavours. And that's what Mike and Charles and this fantastic community that you're all in are actually doing. So what I want you all to do, the one thing, I'm not selling anything, I'm not selling you books, I'm not upselling a course, I'm not doing anything like that. But the one thing I would like you all to do is, hopefully by the end of understanding what the MicroBiz magic way is, to tell a few people what is this way that gets a better survival rate. Actually tweet MicroBiz Matters, because I'm a campaigner as well. And we're actually doing something to get the survival rate up, because I'm absolutely certain if you stay in the game with your own business for the long term, opportunities will come along and you will be able to build bigger businesses. It's about actually staying in the game. So where's my little clicker thing? So Act 1 is magic. And you'll be pleased to know, with my being in the lowest 3% for spatial awareness, I don't do any magic tricks, but I think it's quite important to recognise how I was fooled for something like 20 odd years into believing that the American way was the best way of starting and running a business. In fact, I even did big speeches, actually doing those kind of motivational speeches that you've seen lots of the American speakers do, like Tony Robbins, who gets $3,000 to $4,000 per weekend, and many of my friends have been on that. And I'm not criticising any of this, I'm just saying that it's unlikely that the survival rate will be as high. And magicians are a good example of actually uncovering the truth about things that are actually a little bit of a myth and illusion. I was once really pleased that I persuaded the government when things were going well and they were adopting my MicroBiz magic way through enterprise agencies and some business schools and getting sponsorship from different people. We had a 4-year period where it was going really well in the UK, and startup policy was based on this MicroBiz magic way. It was going really well, and then policy actually changed to actually say, well, we're actually interested in businesses with only 10 employees. Well, I'm interested in micro businesses, which is a business with 0 to 9 employees. There's 5.5 million of us in the UK, and we are 96% of all businesses. So the government policy switched from being interested in us as micro businesses to actually saying we want high growth businesses and we want large employing businesses. And I saw a show in London called the Card Shark Show, and I was absolutely delighted. It's a magic show, but it was actually about the history of card sharks and people cheating through doing card tricks. There's a brilliant magician called Steve Trublier, who unfortunately is not alive anymore, but you can see all of his brilliant work on YouTube. And the first slide had a picture of my favourite artist of all time, which is called Caravaggio. It's named after the village. And Caravaggio's picture is as a card snap. It's called a card snap. If you can see it, and I realise it's a bit of a distance away, you'll actually see somebody at the back putting up 2 fingers, if you like, to the person with the hat on at this end, which is obviously the point that every magician, even if it's unseen, has an accomplice or a series of accomplices in order to pull off the illusion. And basically, the next slide also shows these massive Las Vegas illusions, which are absolutely incredible. We either are fooled by the magician, or we fool ourselves by the angle that the staging is done. And that one is again shows the accomplice as the saw comes down and both sides of the table actually go to other ends of the stage. Yeah. It's because there's an accomplice doing the legs of it. Now that is exactly the same way as what happens, if you like, in terms of a lot of the illusions that are actually made regarding these myths of, there are always accomplices, there are always people that are going to make money out of actually saying it, and there will be the endorsements. So for example, and this is like heresy in America if I ever said that, you'll actually find that Oprah Winfrey, if anybody appears on her show, they are guaranteed to make millions and millions of people money in terms of with the law of attraction and all these different psycho phenomena things. And there's also something there called the Penfold Triangle, which actually shows that you can actually draw some lines and we will actually just fool ourselves into thinking that's a triangle, and there's actually some depth to it. And of course, in actual fact, there's a sculpture of that Penfold Triangle, which shows that in Sydney, Australia, which actually shows it's 3 disconnected pieces of wood, if you like, creating that illusion. And this is really the point, is that if people repeat things enough, if people get things endorsed enough, then people will actually start believing that that is the way ahead. And a guy called the amazing James Randi became a magician, became the leader of really a whole movement. That, I don't know if you've heard of Penn and Teller or Derren Brown, but all of these people have actually, because they're magicians, they know how the illusions are done, especially regarding psychic phenomena. So the amazing James Randi inspired people like Penn and Teller and Derren Brown to actually expose things that actually people take as read, as being actual, by showing how it was done. Not by denigrating them, not saying that they don't believe them, but actually just showing it down. And James Randi did it in the most fantastic way, because he had $1 million bet that anybody who could, under scientific conditions, actually show them that the psychic phenomena could be done, he would actually give £1 million to. And in the 20 years, it's never actually happened. So that's just like a small example of how we can be fooled. And the bottom picture is just to show that I haven't achieved very much in my 22 years of trying to make life better for micro-business owners in the UK, because that was an event of an organisation I founded called THUD Organisation to raise the quality of enterprise support throughout the UK. And I also co-founded an Institute of Enterprise and Entrepreneurs. And that was at our awards event, which I actually held at the Magic Circle. I started holding them at places like BAFTA, Kensington Roof Gardens, all the places I really wanted to go. So I began to feel a bit rebellious, and I was a bit fed up of all the government places and various things. So we went to all the places I wanted to go. And on the stage there are two people. One is called Can You King MBE, the other is called Victoria Lennox. Can You King has developed for urban music a whole culture regarding the MOBO Awards and music of black origin. And she's completely changed by building a community like you're building a community, of helping each other. She's actually completely changed the face of music in the UK. And it's now moved into all sorts of things, but it's an absolutely fantastic movement. Victoria Lennox, one of my problems has always been that I've been saying to the government all the time, best practice is not in the United States. You know, there is a reason that the UK and the US, or the US and then the UK, are 18th and 19th in the World Happiness Leagues. Yeah? There are a lot of countries doing a lot of things better and creating happier communities and various things than the US and UK. And I've said there are many countries that are English speaking as well, like Canada and New Zealand and various things that you can go and look how they're supporting startups and micro businesses. Well, Victoria Lennox, who was about 25 in that picture there, so she's what, 34 now. She has, in the time since we founded Enterprise Rockers to make life better for micro businesses, we're going to have the next MicroBiz Matters Day in Hull, which we're very thrilled about. But she has, from 2012 to now, created the whole of Canada as Startup Canada, where entrepreneurs, business owners are in every major city helping other people to start up. In other words, it said we're not in competition with large corporations and government. We're going to help each other to survive and thrive. And she's developed a complete ecosystem. So that's, now where do they put this? Yeah. So, and just to quickly explain why it's so powerful without getting sued, I'll take a historical example. There's a guy called Edward Bayes, is behind large corporations run governments, and then everything else follows from that in the UK-US world order. And it is large American corporations, of course, which is why 42 people are now earning as much as half of the world. That is how much wealth has actually increased. In actual fact, that wealthy group have actually been increasing at 13% every single year. And if you put it into billions, it's just staggering how much they're actually making. I mean, Jeff Bezos, the Amazon founder, made something like 18 billion overnight. It's staggering amounts of money, but they can all thank one person that you may not have heard of, and his name was Edward Bayes. And Edward Bayes is called the father of public relations. And he started off with trying to recruit people for the US Army for government, because that wasn't a very popular kind of thing. And at the end of the day, he came up with this campaign called He's Keeping the World Safe for Democracy. And you'll actually find that every war since has usually mentioned something about the fact that we're going to war to preserve democracy. It was very successful. He then moved on to actually trying to, he was taken on, he did such great work, he was taken on by a bacon manufacturer to increase the sales of bacon in America. And if you ever wondered where the term a heavy breakfast came from being good, that was Edward Bayer getting his doctor to send out to 4,500 other GPs around America. Would you agree that a heavy breakfast is better to start the day with? Of course, 3,900 came back and said, of course it is, absolutely fantastic. And what ended up was that he then put out saying that bacon and eggs were very, very good way to start off the day. Bacon sales increased incredibly. With smoking, he had the situation where there wasn't a problem with all the men in America smoking, but there was a problem with the women all smoking in America. And so for what is now British American tobacco, with Lucky Strikes, basically he came up with a campaign saying that have a cigarette rather than a sweet will make you slim. And he then tried to conflate it with the fact that women weren't really allowed to smoke in public. So he therefore, on Easter Sunday, at the Easter parades, managed to get people coming out of all the big churches in America smoking in public, and it was called Torches for Freedom. So he actually conflated equality with the right to smoke, and sales went absolutely crazy. He's done millions and millions of things, but he can actually be said to be the person, I mean, as you probably know, Coca-Cola started off, the founder actually said it was arousing for your sexual organs, and then it became useful for the temperance movement, if you like, as an alternative to whatever. There isn't a major brand, I don't think, in America that Edward Bayes hasn't been, and he called it originally psychological warfare, and he said a few people are actually controlling the minds, which of course Orwell said as well in 1984, are actually controlling the minds of all of us, and that's how we get fooled. So therefore the American way, it's a bit provocative for me to say this, but I am saying that the way it exists is that it's easy to get fooled by all the power of this kind of thing going on. And every week, just about, I get upset with something there which says something like more in work but for less pay, as though there are lots of jobs being created. 90% of the jobs we've had created over the last 10 years are us. It's self-employed people. It's people going self-employed. We've had 3 million of us since the start of this. The other jobs that are being created are low-paid part-time jobs, yeah? And so all this more in work is actually never giving any credit to us, the people that are actually doing it. And then whenever you see the figures saying that pay is holding up, or it might be slightly less, they don't include the self-employed pay in any of the figures. They only include employees, because we know, we've got Yorkshire in Business, which I'm incredibly proud of, our enterprise agents in Scarborough here. And day to day, we know that it's tough out there. It's really tough. And that's why I'm going through the micro is magic way, because here's a number of things that can actually move us. The first thing is to not think about Silicon Valley for once. It's actually a small number of jobs and businesses that are in the tech industry. Yeah, most millionaires in the world are actually doing what the Americans call normal businesses. In other words, they're running restaurants, they're they're involved in manufacture, they're involved in services. 70% of all businesses in the UK, as you probably know, are all service businesses, just as 70% are actually one-person businesses. And we actually founded MicroBiz Matters and the MicroBiz Matters Day movement just to recognise the contribution that we actually make to the UK. These businesses with 0 to 9 employees are actually creating, a third of the jobs and 20% of the turnover for the UK. That's a big amount of people that are outside government policy. And of course, we also campaign to say, well, any company that contracts with governments should, in order for them to continue being contracted with government, should pay all their bills within 30 days. In order to be contracted by government, licensed by government, like supermarkets and banks are, funded by government, that they should actually pay all their suppliers within 30 days. Why is that important? Well, it's important because there's £30 billion of money being held over for 42 days. The average time every business in the UK takes to get paid is 72 days. And it's not about prompt payment. It's not about late payment. It's about unfair contract terms that we can't afford to refuse. I can't afford to say to my biggest customer, no, you can't pay me in 60 days or 75 days or whatever. Yeah? And so these kind of things are really important. Now, while that's all going on, we have these two different lots of messages going on, and the majority of messages are in there. Anybody that can see that, is there anything on that slide, which I've called the $1 million mindset, which is the American way? Is there anything on there that you would actually recognise that you've heard before or see on social media day to day? Anybody, just put your hand up? Yeah? Okay. So, Joe, what was the one that you recognised?
The top one, as soon as you look at it, fail to plan is plan to fail.
Fail to plan, plan to fail. You also? Yeah, okay, yeah. Fail to plan, plan to fail. Well, that's a really interesting one, because what I actually was involved in I was creating these, what they call standards, occupational competencies for people starting and running a business and people providing support to them. And I'd just done a massive speech at an event in London, launching these particular standards. And of course, the first set of standards were about business planning. Everybody must have a business plan. Actually, that was the bank's agenda, I found out later on, because it was a way of them actually deciding whether they wanted to give you some money or not. But I was rang up by an academic who'd done a fantastic amount of research, who actually said there's no proof at all that somebody starting a business without a plan does any better than somebody with a plan. And in actual fact, angel investors will tell you that they've never come across a plan that's actually worked out the way people actually provided it. But all these things there's a lot of money being made out of planning software, out of planning books, out of all these kind of things. So it's just an example. Barack Obama spoke the other day and gave that one, which is the same one Branson gives, which is fail fast, fail often, fail better. Well, that's great, but there is something called credit ratings at the moment that you may have come across, yeah? And it's actually not a good idea to have a lot of debt. And so basically, that's why we say bootstrap, don't borrow on the MicroBiz magic way, because the average number of businesses that get that 80% survival rate after 3 years will have not invested more than £2,000 normally that they've actually got from family, friends, or scraped together in terms of their business. Why? Because it'll be 3 to 6 months into the business before they're actually sure of what they're doing and how they're doing it. And in actual fact, to have a large loan is not good news. So the MicroBiz magic way, you probably won't be able to read that, but it includes a number of things. All very, very simple, but if you're starting or running a business in the UK, this is what all the research shows. It shows that bootstrap, don't borrow, so don't get into debt early on because it will take time. The most important one of them all, and I know it's obvious, but is test trade first. And that is where I have my biggest argument with government in America and accelerators and incubators and all of these kind of things. Because what they do is they get people locked in a room in terms of actually coming up with the plans and the strategies and the ideas and the product developments and various things, where in actual fact you've got to test trade to see if there's a market before you start investing in anything at all. And that's why it's so important that you do the side hustle. 50% of really successful people in the UK and the US, and I've got a number of people to mention, they do it. They've succeeded, they've been multi-million-pound businesses, but they've actually done it while they're at university, while they're in a job. They've all had something else, and they've started their business as a side hustle. What does government want you to do? Government wants you to move out of unemployment into self-employment. Yeah? But it can be good to get some money coming in, even in a part-time job, in order so that you can test out the ideas. The other thing is, us as a community, that's asking another business owner. Get advice from somebody that's got the t-shirt, not a bank manager that's just been made redundant, that's doing some mentoring for their career development. Ask a business owner. Ask a business owner that understands the customers you're going to go with and understands that environment and the context of it. So those are just a few things, and controversially, I've always said, ditch the get-rich-quick books. There is no magic get-rich-quick method. It's far better, as Kit says, who couldn't be here today, it's far better to actually concentrate on really, really understanding what you're doing and do that beautifully. And so Kit always says, have a magazine. If you're a writer, have a writing magazine. If you're a caterer, have a catering type magazine. Does that make sense? Concentrate what you're reading about based on the context of the type of business you're actually doing. Now, all of this was clear way back in 1974 when a chap called E.F. Schumacher wrote Small is Beautiful. And he actually said basically then that large corporations can't be trusted to do anything in the public interest. The only people that are likely to be able to help communities are private, small business owners that are actually doing it for just and proper reasons, if you like. And as he basically said, and this one has always resonated me on, is that they will never ever say enough. In other words, they will continue to do whatever is necessary in order to keep making money. So those are a few things regarding the two different ways. And how do I know so much about this? Well, basically, in 1984, I was chief executive of a company called Amway. And if you've not heard of Amway, Amway is a multi-level marketing company. Amway is the largest multi-level marketing company in the world, and is worth 8.1 billion. And Rich DeVos, the founder, who was on that stage there with me, was one of the 80 richest people in America. So a very, very successful corporation. I was chief executive, and you can see it looks like a Trump rally, doesn't it? It looks exactly, that was at the NEC. We had 15,000 there at the NEC that year, and the year after we had 10,000 in the morning and 10,000 in the afternoon. Independent distributors. Now the point is, I'm not being controversial because every single one of these people that are leading these companies, Herbalife and Forever Living, and you may have heard of some of them if you like, it's a 170 billion industry. Also the franchise industry. The franchise industry is a 550 billion pound industry. McDonald's actually made the figures were announced last week, they actually made 17 billion profit. Absolutely incredible. And yet there are strikes going on in America about the fact that they can't afford to pay for their health care. They're all in social housing in the works and various things like that. all of the leaders of these organisations believe in actually what they're doing, but the research doesn't stack up. The research actually shows people are tempted to invest more than they should in the business, either in stock or we call it tools, which are books like Magic of Thinking Big and other things that people are actually selling to them. And a very, very small number of people, and that's the risk. You can go for it, and there are a small number of people that do it, but in actual fact, the majority of people have lost a lot of their valuable time and money. But just think how powerful these large corporations are. And I really enjoyed my time. My boss was a guy called Dick DeVos, the founder's son, when I was chief executive of Amway UK. And he's on the left there. Below him is a guy called Alexander Haig, who was Secretary of State in the US and actually took over for a while in the US when Reagan was shot. And basically, he was Amway's consultant on worldwide trade after he left being Secretary of State and various things. I had to take him to the venue in London and various things, masses of security, all the police came out and various things, but very, very powerful men. Down there in the middle is Betsy DeVos, my boss's wife. Betsy DeVos is now Secretary of State for Education. Betsy DeVos was quite famous for 2 years ago, actually saying, the reason my family has given the Republican Party £19 million is because we want them to do for us in policy terms what we want the Republican Party to do. And she is married to Eric Prince. One of my clients was Prince was the Prince organisation, which later sold to Johnson Controls, that made the interiors for 70% of the cars around the world. And basically, he was the son of a very rich founder, but he's even more powerful because he's been security advisor to at least 3 presidents, and he creates these like mercenary armies that go in and do the thing, so that they can actually do the overthrowing and various things like that. These are very, very powerful people, and Gerald Ford is up there. We were sponsoring the Bob Hope Classic, and Gerald Ford is the next president there. And it really is interesting is the fact that you've got all of this power around. So however controversial they are, a bit like Trump does, Trump started off with something like 2,300 legal cases against him when he started off as president, if you like. But he's been used to that in his life. These large corporations do something, then they settle legally. Even I have a very large legal budget. So the figures don't stack up, whereas there are some people around the world that I would suggest that you actually look on YouTube and actually see. One of my heroes is in the middle there, and his name is called Dr. Ernesto Ciroli. He's very famous now because about 3 years ago, he did a TED talk which got 3 million views on YouTube. And it was actually saying how patronising and paternalistic business support is. And he spent his lifetime regenerating communities. And I just want to give you an incredibly successful in terms of helping us start up, run a business and thrive. And just 2 or 3 things. I'll tell you his big joke that actually made not a joke, but it's a true story, is that he always complains about the fact there's been £1 trillion worth of aid actually given around the world to help in Africa and different countries, if you like, and it's all been wasted. It's very difficult to prove that it's actually been successful at all. And he said it's because of a patronising and paternalistic idea. What people think in large corporations is that the little guys don't know what they're doing. And so he tells a story of the first time he learned that was in Africa, and it was on the banks of the Zambezi, and they said, well, this soil is fantastic, we'll teach you how to grow these wonderful vegetables and fruits and all various things, and they did. And they created these absolutely massive zucchini, big Italian tomatoes, because he's from Italy originally. And it was absolutely fantastic and all these, and then one night, a whole group of hippos came along and ate the lot of them. And they went to all the people and said, "Why didn't you tell us? We've eaten all." You didn't ask. And the first rule of Soroli is never try to help somebody to start their own business unless they want help. And then the second rule is to ask questions. And then the third rule is once you've understood what it is that they actually want to do, find out which bits of it they can do. Because the other thing you'll say is there isn't a single entrepreneur in the world, and this is proven, that has made their money on their own and that can do all of making it, creating it, marketing it, selling it, and looking after the money, looking after the cash flow and the pricing and all the various things. There isn't anybody that can do it. That doesn't mean to say you've got to take on employees, but it does mean to say you've got to surround yourself with people like Charles and Mike and all the people that will have a skill that you can do. And that's really what we want from this as a community, is that we just help each other survive. The reason Sugar was there is that I did have the opportunity, and my father was on the left, and I won't go into all the reasons, but the reason is that although I'm not very keen on many of Lord Sugar's things, he was, at the time, I was trying to find out what the truth was to actually starting and building a business successfully, what you needed to do. He was one of our clients of my business, which has been going on for 32 years while I've been doing all this other stuff. I've had to earn a living myself. And basically, he was one of our clients because he was recommended by another chief executive that we could actually help them market a particular product that he didn't want to put through chain stores. Dixon's was his big thing, and PC World, and how to do it. And I actually found the product ended up a dud, but the one thing you learn about real entrepreneurs, and I've learned it from Gordon Roddick, who was at a meteoric body shop. I learned it from Peter Kindersley, Gordon Kindersley books. They move on very, very quickly. They don't get fixated with their idea or their product. If it's not working, yeah, they'll move it and they'll move on to something else. They're continually creating industry. And I actually learned that Sugar's way of actually doing things was absolutely right. It was all based on bootstrap, not borrowing. So he started his business making more and more money. He actually said, great, thanks, Mike. He actually said that, the most important thing to him was to see if he could sell more in 3 days so that he could invest more money in actually developing more products, and he eventually got enough money to be able to actually get the patent for a product and various things, and then put that with the manufacturer. But his whole thing has been based on, and most entrepreneurs are exactly like that. They've actually grown organically, not with major investments. What can I tell you very quickly about the other areas? So for large corporations in the business opportunity industry, like the franchise industry, pubcos, there's another one, the direct multi-level marketing industry. What if I'm saying that that's not the way? The other thing, and I'll get killed for this because there are some people in the room that need government funding. It was only 7 years that I was bold enough to sort of resign from all the organisations that were receiving government funding that I founded over the years, is because a lot of government programmes have got their own agenda, which may not be the micro's magic word. And you will actually find not a tremendous success rate with things like startup loans, for example. Because the average is much more than that 2,000, I don't know, what is it, 8,000, 9,000 or whatever.
Virgin's is 15,000.
How much?
Virgin's is 15,000.
15,000. So here we've got somebody who could be unemployed, probably couldn't get the money from a bank in order to get on startup loan, that is now starting their business with 15,000 to pay back, like student loans and those things. So I won't go into it because I'll start ranting about it, but you know, I was very lucky for a while to be in places like St George's House in Windsor with all the great and good coming up with all of these policy things. And we did some good work for a number of years, but because they are now trying to go the American way, which is pick winners, they're actually interested in large employing businesses rather than survival. They're hoping that they've given some money and some of those will become the big success stories, if you like. So all I'm saying is just be slightly aware of, you know, they could do a lot more for us by cutting the cost of utilities. There isn't anybody, including my friend who I'm going to mention before I finish, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, the richest person from Hull also, my school friend, and he's worth £21.5 billion. So he's the richest person in Britain, and he's 3 times as rich as that rich divorce I was saying. He's 5 times as rich as Donald Trump. So £21.5 billion. But he would say that you can't make any money in the UK because the costs of doing business are so high. And you know, basically the government could have done an awful lot, like just in reducing utility costs, you know, reducing broadband and Wi-Fi costs. If you've got my business card, you'll see me tweet every day with people all the way around the country that have actually, you know, got to make a decision between food or continuing with paying for broadband at their house in order to, you know, some tough decisions. So all I would say is that I'll let you know when there are government programs that you shouldn't be worried about, because just be careful with it. That's really all I would say. Okay, let's go quickly through it. That's just an example of why I eventually decided to say I want to be totally independent of government, large corporations, if I'm going to try and do as much as I can in the rest of my life. And it's not probably for many years, is it? But I wanted to actually make sure that I wasn't receiving any money from large corporations and I wasn't receiving any money from government. And the thing that actually swayed me on that was something called the Ethnic Minority Business Task Force, which I was on for 2 years. So we're now up to, you know, 10 years ago, 8 years ago. And basically that was to actually improve startup and survival rates of ethnic minorities across the UK. And you might recognise 1 or 2 famous faces there. There's, it's a long way off. But anyway, there's Lord Mandelson there, and there's a chap called James Kahn, who I very much like. I think he's very, very good. And there was a whole group of us, about 18 of us there. Most of us were business owners, and most of us, the government thought we could do this. So we input for 2 years, and we met in all the wonderful places that government let you meet at. They're absolutely fantastic. And at the end of the day, the report was unrecognisable from our input over a 2-year period. And you can see I'm not usually very shy, but I'm hidden right at the back. You can't even see me. Whereas that's the Study Advisory Council, which I'm still on, which is the organisation I founded. I'm at the front with my hat on, if you like. I was so ashamed that all that work wasn't going to benefit ethnic minority groups in the UK. And so I decided to actually make a break from it all. The self-help industry is really easy. I've mentioned, I think, enough about it. Those are kind of the titles, and that's been going on ever since the New Thought movement in America, which gets very mixed up with some evangelical kind of stuff as well. I'm not saying that if you believe in it, if you believe in the law of attraction, Rhonda Burns, that's been going since Napoleon Hill, and all these different people created it for many years. Many people believe in it. All I'm saying is, read it, enjoy it, maybe believe in it, but this isn't a mindset business. Starting and running your own business is a doing business. Make sure that the majority of your time is about doing. And if you're interested in it, then there are a lot of people around the world that have seen all this research that has been going on and that have actually written books to actually show that in actual fact, the UK and the US are one of the reasons that we're way down in the happiness league in the world, and the stress levels of the workplace are so high, is because of all this concentration on the self. The second most successful psychologist in the world, voted by his peers, is a chap called Albert Ellis. He used to call it masturbation. He said the way to release yourselves is actually to start understanding that I must do well. You must treat me well. The world must be easy. Is not the way life actually is. And basically, imagining, making big dreams and various things is a way to go, but it's not the way that the majority of people succeed. And for example, Barbara Ehrenreich actually did a brilliant piece of work, and she studied on all sorts of subjects, but where she fell out with it all was that she was actually thrown out of the cancer group. She did have cancer because she wasn't showing a positive enough attitude. And basically that was a big mistake because she is a cellular scientist and she hasn't found any research to show that she was doing anything that would get in the way of her recovery from cancer. So there are a lot of people that there's something called the Yale study. I don't know if anybody has actually seen it, but it's in 1959. They took a group of Yale graduates and they found that 3% of them had actually made the wealth of the other 97% 10 years later. They'd made all that huge money, and they'd done it by big goals. They had a clear idea of where they were going to go, what they were going to achieve, and they'd created big goals. As Oliver, I forget his second name, but as he says, there's only one problem with the Yale study that is quoted in every single book that you'll actually read on positive thinking and positive psychology. It didn't exist. It didn't happen. Basically, it was a made-up story, and when they actually went round to find out who made it up, and he checked with Yale and all the various things, they just repeated the lie because it fitted with make big goals, big dreams, and various things. So that's the self-help industry. I decided I'd really had enough of beating my head against the wall with all of these various things, so I went to Malta and I wrote a satire on it. Well, I'd written it before, called Stripping for Freedom, with an author called Sakulit Hertz. She has a single celebrity name now because, like Beyonce and Rihanna and various things, her full name is Leonora Sakulit Hertz, but she calls herself Sakulit Hertz now. She wrote this book called Freedom from Bosses Forever. It looks fantastically like a self-help book, but is in actual fact a satire based on all the things that I actually did. And I rewrote it, went to Malta for a year, rewrote another couple of books, and decided, well, what can I actually do about this to make a difference with my last number of years? And these are some of the conclusions that I've been going around the country explaining to people. This is a good place to start. Number one, make your role models, not these people that Dr. Ciroli describes that are in Silicon Valley that probably burn out with masses of debts, but will be actually shown to the world as being successful entrepreneurs. Make some of your role models from other areas where they're running a business like a micro-business. And so, for example, Tina Burton, who co-founded MicroBiz Matters Day with me in this whole Enterprise Rockers movement, I wrote a thing for LinkedIn about an inspirational leader, a leader that with best practice, and I wrote it about Tina, and that's us in a fancy place in London, and the award was presented by Sir Alex Ferguson. Now, this bit's upsetting Charles already. He's probably left because you haven't mentioned it. But basically, he's a prime example of somebody who said that the reason he was so successful, the number one reason he was so successful, was longevity. A bit like a micro-business owner, I'm not trying to make, which nobody is able to do, all my money within 3 years. This is a career for me. This is something I want to build on and improve and test rate that and move that way and various things like that. I've got lots of sports stars. I mean, incidentally, I'm probably like many of you, is if you look at lots of entrepreneurs, it looks as though they're obsessed by business. Well, Sir Jim Ratcliffe isn't. Sir Jim Ratcliffe is just like me. He loves sport and he loves an awful lot of things more in life than just business. But he has created lots of fun, as he says, in building INEOS together. And if you read anything about it, he runs it in a collegiate way. Now, obviously, there's tens of thousands of employees. From all he's done is bought corporations and had to start quite small, put all his money. He uses something called junk bonds. I don't know if you've heard of junk bonds, but basically, a junk bond is high-risk investments for somebody to give the money in on a bond, like a premium bond. But if it succeeds, then you'll get, within 5 years, with compound interest, you'll double your money. You'll get 8% a year, if you like, on that. So people take a risk, and when they take a risk on, and he had to risk his house, his family, everything in order to make his first buy off BP. The risk is that Jim Ratcliffe can't, using what I believe are Micro's magic principles of managing a business, can't make it a lot more successful than BP or Shell or Esso or all these companies he'd worked for in the past. And what he does is he makes them incredibly successful, and that's how he's made his money, by buying up what other people might regard as basket cases from all of these large companies. But the key word is, he says, we're collegiate. In other words, we work together as a small group of people, helping each other all the time. They move location with him as well, this small group of people that he's with all the time. His managing directors are treated like business owners. They all have a share in each of the businesses, so that it's their business, if you like, the expansion. And that small group of people are managed in a collegiate way. And unlike the Trump American way, I love the fact that he says, and we can't stand bullies. I'd also like to mention, I could have gone for any sport, but I thought I'd just go for tennis very quickly. Have a look at biographies. Are a very good way of looking at people that are managing a small number of people, looking after a small number of people, even if it's a freelancer. Yeah, freelancers around you, and actually being successful. And Roger Federer, for example, is a prime example. Between those two, they've got 60 Grand Slams between Serena and Roger Federer. And basically, they've actually created a situation whereby they are both still improving or still getting somewhere because they're the greatest practitioners in the world. Federer, for example, was terrible as a kid because he was obviously a prodigy playing tennis, but he only liked going on the court in tournaments to win matches. And he eventually learned that the only way of becoming successful is to practice in various things and win the matches, and that's why he was able, after operations and all sorts of things, to come back. And I go and see him every year. I'm seeing him this year at the ATP finals. And basically, he's developed even 2 strokes over the last year or so, but he wasn't at 30, nearly 34, 35. Serena Williams actually says it's about how you manage to dance. There's no such thing as failure. She's not saying failed with it, but it's how you manage to dance, to practice, to go up again. So I'm going to take 2 minutes just to finish. The future is, I think, quite bright because of the fact that if you're actually looking at it as a micro-business rather than as a boiled-down big business, what you'll be doing is developing lots of different income streams so that as one dries up, another one will increase. Now, one of those income streams could even be a little part-time job in various things. But the whole point is that there is going to be more and more competition, and so we need to work together to take money from the large corporations. We need to love local and start buying local. We need to be working with other independent business owners. We as a community need to be finding ways of making each other meet. And there are going to be lots of opportunities because the way the technology is going, there are going to be more time for people in jobs to spend money on leisure type things, and even in driverless cars they're going to need different things, if you like. And small businesses with the technology, using things like hydroponics and all of these different things, can create some fantastic specialist niches. All I'm saying is don't rely on just one, create a number. The point is the large corporations, as is being proved, are too inflexible to be able to take these opportunities quickly enough in the marketplace. So just a few more of my favourite friends and then we finish. Basically, I work day to day with the brilliant Tina Burden, who on our MicroBiz Matters movement. And she would be an example of somebody who has always been self-employed, running their own business over 25 years, but has probably had about 7 or 8 different businesses during that time. And just recently, about a year or so ago, she was actually asked, she'd had a business in the hospitality industry, and she was asked by a bed and breakfast keeper if they would look after the bed and breakfast for a week while they had a holiday, if you like, because they knew it very good. And she actually started asking questions, which is the biggest skill of any micro-business owner, to ask questions. And she started to ask other B&B owners, were they able to take a break? Were they able to do things? And people said, oh, very difficult trusting somebody to take in our house to take over the whole thing. Anyway, she is booked up for next year. She created a brand, the B&B Keeper, and she is doing weeks at a time in bed and breakfasts. She's even speaking at major conferences on it. And that's a new business, another new business that she's just started off. And how's she done it? By asking questions, then creating a brand. And what's the brand about? Brand's all about trust, isn't it? It's why should I trust Tina Burden, which is something a large corporation can't do? Why would I trust Tina Burden particularly to take over my house and run the bed and breakfast for a week or so? And I use freelancers as, you know, we recommend. The government is interested in you taking on employees. I think the future is bright because we work with each other. So if we need help, let's use a freelancer. That's giving them some money, and we'll work collaboratively, and the quality will be really high. Because the great thing about micro-biz owners is that keeping a customer is as important as winning a customer. So I work with lots of people, including, there was a picture on the cycle of my best friend and business partner for 33 years, called Claire Francis. And, you know, basically all of my businesses wouldn't have, they're our businesses, and none of them would have succeeded without us being partners, because we can't do all these things. So I'm saying 4 lessons for the future on the MicroBiz magic way. Choose ladder holders. Choose the people that can actually give you some help to move your business forward and that understand your business and particularly your customers. And money and customers, cash flow especially, and customers are more important than mindset. The world of a micro-business owner is ensuring that you're spending the majority of your time winning and keeping customers and doing things beautifully for them to stay. And whereas Trump would say the biggest skill, and I think it's a massive skill, is the top skill for an entrepreneur is negotiation, which he prides himself on as his top skill. I would say the top skill is learning how to ask questions. Learning how to ask questions that take you from somebody saying, yeah, that's not bad, or I might do that, to actually finding out why they might do that, how much they would pay to do that, whether they would actually go to somewhere to actually buy that, whether, yeah, you get the idea. It's actually marketing in today's age, and we can do this fantastically through social media as well, is about asking questions. That's at the Isle of Wight Pop Festival. We haven't got time to do this at the moment, but there are 2 theories. We were there for a long time, but it was quite interesting because there were 600,000 of us on the Isle of Wight, and 2 acts there that were acoustic acts went down bigger than all of the massive bands from all of the world. And that's because There's a lot of people that say be unique, and I'm one of them. That's the advantage we've got as a micro-business owner, is be unique. There's a lot of people that say, don't follow the crowd. I think you should actually follow the crowd, like these two particular people do. One was called John Sebastian. He'd been very successful at Woodstock because they'd had a problem in the during the day with heavy rain. And therefore, they ended up in the situation where they couldn't put the big electric bands on. He was only there to watch, but he was backstage because he knew lots of the people there. And he did a 2-hour show while it was raining and got everybody singing. And so by the time he got to the Isle of Wight, his name was fantastic. He could charge as much as the bands with all the roadies and the various things. So he went to the crowds, if you like, and he took his own way of actually doing it. The other was a guy called Henry Curry, called Tiny Tim, who was a most unlikely person, but he did exactly the same thing. He actually ended up, doing tiptoe through the tulips, these incredible things that sometimes I do. I'm lucky I'm not going to do. But he ended up with that, and the crowd who'd never heard of him before, ended up putting his album to #1. So it's about going to the crowd and actually finding some people that actually come to you. I don't like the idea of you being so unique that you're going to people that aren't even interested in something similar. Crowd building, so build your particular crowds. And always, whenever you're starting off with a new crowd or a new income stream, test the water first. That's that test trading thing, every time. There's 5 or 6 people, all of which are very famous entrepreneurs. They all support MicroBiz Matters Day, which is coming to Hull. They probably won't all be coming to Hull, but they've all been fantastic, giving up their time free because they believe in this. Business owners helping business owners is the way ahead. And if you want to look at them on YouTube, there's Penny Power OBE, who created the Academy, which is incredibly successful. Then unfortunately, LinkedIn and Facebook came along. And they provided free what the Academy was charging for. She lost it all with her husband, Thomas Power, and has now built up with all sorts of ways, because she believes very strongly, although she's in technology, that at the end of the day, business is personal. And so she's built up another communities and various things. Tim Campbell was the first Apprentice winner, one of my heroes, one of my good friends really. He's been absolutely fantastic. He always talks about his mother making ends meet with her sewing business and various things. And because Tim, who's super fit with various things, actually wants to completely retire at the youngest possible age he can, he's got 5 different businesses to my knowledge, and he's an employee of James Cahn's headhunting business in the world. So people are actually doing a number of things to make their money. Chris Percival is now 25. He's already got a 35, 40 million pound business, but he started up as university, and he started it up in the paramedic room. Remember we were talking about things that are ordinary things that people actually doing? Well, he now supplies ambulances kitted up with paramedics all over the world. And so therefore it's solving problems. But he started off converting his father's car while he was at university to do festivals and various things. And he just never knew which of the businesses that he created, because he had first aid supplies, all sorts of different businesses, but it ended up being these fully kitted out, ready to go, paramedics on board, ambulances that people actually came and taking massive volume. And the last one I should mention, because he'd kill me if I don't, well, I'll just mention Sway. Sway at the top there is one of the top rappers in the UK, multi-Mercury and award-winning thing, but he actually realised that he was such a perfectionist that the thing he was known for, which is his writing and rapping, it would take him years to actually be satisfied with anything he actually did. And he's a prime example that said, oh, I've got to do something else, and what do I love as much as that? well, I love making young stars, a bit like Kanye King, successful. So he was the guy that found Ed Sheeran, who's been quite successful, if you like. So you can see what I'm doing with all these multiple income streams. Kanye King, I mentioned as well. Collaborate. Let's see if we can work together. MicroBiz matters. And if you just think that basically those four things, passion, perseverance, promotion, partnership, they've all got a Gertie good habit side, they've all got a Bertie bad habit side, yeah? You need them all in your business, yeah? But don't be afraid. Persistence is great, but don't be afraid to ditch something that isn't working and move on to something else, yeah? Promotion, you've got to do all of the time, but actually make sure it's with the people that will accept that type of promotion. There's no point doing in today's age what we call interrupting, just selling. You've got to end up with conversations with people. And partnership, which I think is the most fantastic thing. That's it. I'm about to finish. I'll just finish with 2-3 people out of that list. One is J.K. Rowling, who, a bit like people have said, rags to riches story and an entrepreneur like Jim Ratcliffe and various things. They're not really. They don't see it like that. But she did get to the point when her mother died, was with multiple sclerosis and died, when her marriage broke up and various things, where she was at rock bottom. But and it actually took her from 7 years, I think it was, from the time that she started writing Harry Potter to the time that it was actually published. But what she actually did was she actually concentrated on what she was good at. She believed very much that you had to practice, read. If she was going to create Harry Potter into the product that she wanted for the children, and she didn't expect to make much money, and neither did a publisher expect her to make much money because they only published 1,000 of it, and the first 12 publishers that a literary agent went to rejected it altogether, and the publisher told her not to give up a job because she wasn't going to make any money out of children's fiction. But the point is, she persevered, she kept going, but she had a passion for what she was doing, to like Federer, to like Serena Williams, to all these people, to practice, to do it absolutely wonderfully and beautifully. And the last person, I won't mention the Clooney stuff, but the last person on that slide is Charlie Mullins' driver. And he drives Charlie Mullins, he's in his 70s, and drives Charlie Mullins' Bentley around. Pimlico Plumbers, first £30 million plumber, if you like, and he did it by just a level of customer service that got all the celebrities in London to actually rave about what he was actually doing. And he was actually doing it to get positive cash flow because he was ringing all of them and saying people will actually be in the house at the appointed time. They don't want a cup of tea, they'll be in a uniform, and they'll be out within 20 minutes. It will cost this amount of money, and you must pay the person before they leave your house. The celebrities absolutely loved it, but he'd done it because a bank, he won't allow banks anywhere near his premises anymore. A bank had actually pulled his overdraft from him, and so he was finding a way of giving such exceptional customer service. And all the celebrities made his name for him, and he's in all the trades now. But his driver was taking us around for a MicroBiz Matters Day, and was driving very aggressively and various things. And he parked on this red line. A red line in London is like death. It's like people coming out with machine guns and various things for it. And he said, "What can they do to me at my age?" And that's been my philosophy ever since I met that guy called Eric. So I hope you've enjoyed the show. There's lots of things that we haven't done, but I hope you've got the difference between the American way and the Micro's magic way as a way of starting up, surviving and thriving. And remember, if it wasn't for Venetian blinds, it'd be curtains for the rest of us. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to make sure I'm actually talking to this time. Can I get another massive round of applause for Tony? So what we're going to do is we have a lot of food in the corner. So what we're going to do is we're just going to quickly move these benches here, and then if you would like to go and help yourself some food, the bar is open as well. So please have some well, please beer and.
Oh, I'll buy it. Oh, no, we can. Yeah, right then. Right.
Is it all right? I didn't use all my books because I decided that it'd be faster if I
Yeah.
just carried on.
I do like the props.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah,
I
I do like the property.
Do you want a glass of wine, Tony, or are you not allowed to drink because you're on
I think I can.
all right, okay. Red.
You want some?
No, no.
Yeah,
Red, white, and...
So 3 reds
Is
and
it
a
all
white.
right?
Yeah, we know that.
Right, 3 reds and a white. Yeah, because you'll need to do this, won't you?
Yeah, I'll come over. It's my code.
I think I know, but I'm not sure.
Oh, right. I'll check my teenage things to work out. How are you getting work? You want to do that? Yeah. That's not bad. Yeah. That's fine, no problem. Oh, no, that's fine. My teenage son, I didn't take the dog out. God bless. And he didn't feel comfortable. He's a teenager. He's got girlfriend. He's distracted.
Tracy's son is who I work with, like, she's like 27. Yeah, she still has the problem.
Oh, yeah. They have to stop being like that.
Not there a second, I might put it near a laptop, but it's can't be careful.
Rich, I'm And I bought this sachet of tuna, thinking like, Sandy was nurses not having to work on the so yeah, that would be awesome. What if I didn't eat it? Really? It won't count. Chocolate
Is that those flavoured tunas that they
Yeah.
do? Absolutely, I think they look like cat food, like an expensive cat food.
Yeah, it just kept putting me off because I thought I've seen my cat sachet. I just thought, I can't.
Have you ever had beef in a tin? Roast beef with gravy. Smells just like cat food. Just like cat food, yeah. As soon as you open the tin. And it's like pizzas.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to get some sweet.
yeah, I'll get some to eat. Do you know about Master Jam and Cream? Do you know about Master Jam and Cream? Master Jam and Cream.
It's not your job.
Okay. One at a time. Master Jam and Cream. Right, what is exciting?
That was very different to the last time I did this. This was more interesting than the last one. We went on to talk after that, you did some more days. The last one was sorry, Jen. If I move now, I'm not flying on, so I'm getting to it. Pretty expensive.
Which is mine. Very good at twisting government funding being very strict. I'm very good at twisting that to making things. I make the rules. I'm a real bender. It works.
feedback.
Yeah. Oh yeah, what a great idea. I don't think my kid will win anything, do you? With the mother I am.
Yeah, I'm honest, I don't really want this job.
Yeah.
Kids like when you make anything out of red paper. You can make the concept out of material or anything like that. But give it 24 hours and a couple of rolls of red paper and she'll do something.
I mean, I went to the Halloween party, first year, I didn't want to go the whole time, and the night of the Halloween party, I'm going out Halloween, I'm like, no, this is just my girl. Yeah, exactly. I don't want to go, it's like crying, I don't want to do. I'm going to shoot over recently. He wouldn't try to find me, but I think that's what I would do. Because he was the only like ghost machine. Everyone else had passed out.
Proper outfit.
Yeah.
Do you know that's probably why you wanted it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, that's, you're back to that point. It's very different.
Yeah,
It's just and then buying.
I mean, I disorganized, never remembering anything, always on the girls. They always, you know, like, they always reward him for my failures. You know, like, you know, your mum's just cobbled back together in our town. I'm going to give you a special treat.
Yeah, we're not going to knock you back for that.
My son's going to be exactly the same.
Yeah, but Harry's brilliant. Harry's just nice. And he's so, I'm not a children person, I really am. I've got to touch my own. Bring your dog in to see me, you not bring your children. That's fine with me. And yet Harry comes in and I can talk to him, like have a conversation with him, and it's not, you don't dump yourself down to
I don't like children, I like that.
yeah.
Oh, I do.
I give back to them. Anybody else says,
Yeah.
step away from me.
Same here.
Yeah, I think that's the most parents to do. Like our own. They don't like anybody else.
Same here. I don't like kids. Just go with my own. I still like it though.
Oh yeah.
I like mine. Most of the time. Sometimes I still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's problems in that.
You know, I've got a 15-year-old now, 11-year-old. And that's why I'm playing. When I'm working and I
It's nice that they're free to do that. Yeah. They don't really also drink cover and they
That's really true. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah.
I've had a client see me today, and his wife is upset because their sons have not let them lead to his
If everyone would like to take the stage, we're going to start the pictures in a minute.
Oh yeah, they're serious. Yeah, they're doing artists now in the evening, they're not allowed to eat anybody, because they're under 18, if anybody near them might be going near any alcohol, they're not allowed to go. They can do that. So it's still got the rules and regulations around what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. And he was saying, we don't understand why he suddenly is rebelling at 16 and saying he doesn't want this and he doesn't want that. And I thought, yeah, well, I know exactly where he's coming from.
wasn't anyone on there. We've got the end seat if you want that. But do with a selfie anyway. That's actually warmed up in second. No, I don't know. He's very independent.
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
When they hit sort of kind of level, you're not them and they have a voice, and then all of a sudden, emotion, it's hard to it's more practical when you push my fire now. I'm a dread of the emotions, I'm doing the debates about being around things, reasoning, yeah. It's that I find more draining. It's more complex problems. I know what I've got to do.
Yeah, got it.
Speaker at Net. National Enterprise. No, not him.
It's good. No, it's great. He's one of the highest paid speakers.
Okay, so I'm going to make a start on the pitches. So the way the pitches can work is we have 3 young entrepreneurs that are going to pitch. Each pitch is going to take 5 minutes, so then we'll pitch to you for 5 minutes, and then we'll be an opportunity for you to ask 5 minutes worth of questions. So we'll hear from each of the 3 pitches, and it'll be a small break whilst there's 5 judges, and then at the end we'll announce the winner. So this pitch should go quite quickly. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Samuel McCann.
Good evening. Right, so my name's Sam McCann. I'm now a senior student from Hull University. The business that I'm starting is the Type 2 clinic, and the problem that it tackles is Type 2 diabetes in the world. So in the UK alone, there's 3 million people with Type 2 diabetes. In the US, there's about 10 times as much. 30 million people with Type 2 diabetes. And this number goes up by 1.5 million people every year. 1.5 million people every year in the United States are diagnosed with Type 2 diabetes. And a lot of this is due to the lack of education. So people don't know what they're putting into their bodies, don't know how to correctly read nutrition labels, don't necessarily have the correct diet, and that's what I'm sort of trying to help Type 2 diabetics with. The way I'm going to do this is I'm in the middle of trying to develop an app. It's an app on the App Store, it's a course, and it teaches people how to properly check nutrition labels, what diet that they should be on, any precautionary procedures that they should be doing beforehand. And there's been a lot of study on this. However, in the NHS and stuff like, places like that, They don't seem to, advertise it. They don't let a lot of people know about, the specific type of dieting. And I didn't sort of believe it at first until I started going into the case studies. I've read tens and tens and tens, hundreds probably, of different case studies where it's actually been shown to make a dramatic decrease in the amount of insulin that a type 2 diabetic has to take. My stepdad actually has been a type 2 diabetic for the past 10 years, and I started to, sort of teach him about this way of dieting and whatnot. He was on 45 units of insulin a day, and for the past 5 months he's not had to have any whatsoever. And he's on his way of actually kicking type 2 diabetes and been forever, for good. And I think this is a big problem in the world. It's growing year by year. And in the UK alone, 500 people are actually dying from type 2 diabetes related issues. I don't know if any of you read the Daily Express, but it was on there just last week. So the reason that I'm starting the business is obviously from a bit of a personal background, but I think that if something doesn't happen in the near future, it's going to get to the point where it's out of control, and there's not much that people can do about it. At the minute, it's just sort of an idea, prototype phase. I am sort of trying to get funding for the business. As money makes the world go around. Can't do anything without any money. The main sort of expenses that I've come across so far are the development. It's amazingly expensive to actually develop applications for the iPhone, Google, Android. Another one would be solicitors, making sure that all the legal side is okay, terms and conditions, privacy policy, all this sort of stuff, government regulation. It's all got to be taken into consideration, and I can't do all that by myself. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much my business. So.
Is there anyone that would like to ask questions?
How do you make the money out of it? You pay a monthly subscription fee for the application. It wouldn't just be the course. Initially, it would mainly be getting the information out there. But we want, as a business, we want to try and sort of make a community of people that have struggled with type 2 diabetes and share their success stories or the struggles that they've had. So we'd be charging a monthly subscription for them to have that service.
Presumably there's a lot of undiagnosed people out there. Are there any opportunities in that respect?
There's an absolutely huge opportunity for that. I'm sort of trying to crawl before I can walk and walk before I can run. About 2 billion people in the world are clinically overweight, and anybody who has sort of an excess amount of fat around their midriff is technically, to a certain degree, insulin resistant, which is pre-diabetes. But not to a point where they've been diagnosed as type 2 diabetic. And there are a lot of people that are fully blown type 2 diabetic that haven't actually been clinically diagnosed yet, so that would definitely be an area that we'd want to go down at some point.
So sort of 2 questions but in one. So one of Tony mentioned about business planning. So how have you found the planning process, and what market research have you undertaken with your actual target customers? What sort of feedback have they given you? Would they use an app as such? Because would some be too old to maybe access that on a phone?
Yeah, well, I think the internet's a lot where everything's sort of heading. That's where technology's pushing. So that's where we want to be to start off with anyway, because everybody in the UK, Canada, USA, Australia, Europe, all use phones, all use computers. you know, I mean, if the information was out there, I'm sure I could, you know, get somebody's help to sort of set up. In regards to the business plan, it has been difficult. I've had a lot of talks with, I had a talk with the CEO of diabetes.co.uk to sort of, you know, sort of get some figures and how we went about it, which was really useful. And in regards to sort of statistics, I've also talked to the head of research for type 2 diabetes and endocrinology and I got some, you know, pretty good statistics and information pointers and whatnot that way. So it's been an ongoing process in regards to planning. Yeah.
What's your background? Are you coming at this from medical studies or are you coming at it from business background?
Business background. I've always been into sort of health and fitness. I've got a BTEC in sport from college. It's always been something that I was interested in, but I think for me personally, business was better out for university. I think it gave me more options, and I did want to eventually start my own business, whether it be around the health and fitness industry, which it's turned out to be. Yeah, so that's my background really. Fantastic.
Fantastic. Right, so next up is Robin Kurt.
Hello everyone, I'm Robin. As you can tell, I have a bit of an accent. That's because I'm from Germany originally. However, I spent some years in secondary school attending an international school in Italy, which is where I first came across high fashion and high society. I locally managed to get in at a scholarship, but most people attending were very wealthy. So I kind of came into this crowd of everybody was wearing these amazing clothes. There were all these amazing events. Like here in England, I attended one prom, they had fall, where everybody would have bespoke dresses made. And something like that to me was incredibly foreign. However, I loved getting involved with it. And locally, probably because of my personality, I was never judged upon not being quite able to match up financially to that point. Apart from that as well, the schools in Italy tend to be in these high building blocks, not these old traditional buildings. And the school below my school was a fashion school, which meant that every morning for 2 years I had to walk through these corridors of these fashion students that were slightly older than I was at the time, creating all these amazing one-off garments and functional pieces that like you never get to see unless you're literally walking through the school. So it wasn't just the product, but every day I'd see a bit more being added and see it come together from start to finish. However, after I moved back to England, I kind of lost track of the actual process, and I just started thinking from a consumer's perspective. I was kind of enticed by really high-end brands and started saving all my money, even just at school starting by saving up my lunch money, selling cans of Coke and stuff for like a pound profit, that sort of thing, to younger kids who weren't allowed to leave school, just to be able to buy the next pair of sneakers or the nicest jeans or trousers. I was at the time more looking at going to the direction of law and psychology, and I ended up getting accepted for a law degree at Edinburgh, which everyone in my family was very educationally driven, thought was amazing. However, when it came to attending 4 days before the course was supposed to start, I decided to drastically change to study fashion instead, much to the displeasure of my family. However, they have supported me since. And it was throughout studying fashion that I really learned the process, where you start, how you get inspired, which is something I'd never even thought about. I would just like fashion. I thought at the very start, maybe I'll become one of those bloggers, maybe I'll be a buyer for a company like Selfridges. However, while studying, I also attended an apprenticeship at the bespoke tailor St. Paul. It's called Cock of the Walk. I don't know if you know it. If you don't, it's amazing. And it was working under Jill, who owns it, that I really learned the value of garments, how something is made from start to finish, how it should be priced up, how you should treat customers, how really a bespoke piece is made, how you really care about fashion, how it's not just, oh, it's my name, I want to be famous. And that kind of led me to the thought process at the end of my degree, where I realized I don't want to be that type of designer. I don't want to be the next Chanel. I don't want to be Dior. I don't want to be famous for me. I just want to make good garments that last a long time, that I like to make. And maybe things that I can't find, I can't buy anymore, for whatever reasons that might be. So after leaving uni, I very quickly realized that there are no jobs in fashion in whole other than the apprenticeship I was attending in a very few other places, apart from generally sales positions at Topshop and River Island. And to be honest, after a 3-year-long apprenticeship and degree, that's not what you're looking for. You put the time in, it costs a lot of money to study fashion as well, all of which I had to work for myself. So I just thought, I've gone this far myself, why not set up my own business? I've kind of gone into my brand idea with the concept of where I'm from, Hamburg in Germany, which has a very strong biker and rocker culture, which is also very much what I like. However, it's something you do not come across anymore. Finally, I've gotten very bored of seeing the same type of high-end design, fashion branding, always being repeated. So I've come to the point where now I'm considering ways of advertising myself, and I've come to develop a really cool system, and it's creating fantasy-like figures, which will be put into my website, which you'll be able to dress up and things instead of it actually being humans, or the orcs and elves and that sort of thing, which will slowly be developed into a game, a standalone game itself. However, my main process is still the garment process. That's simply an advertising point. Thank you. I almost forgot, my brand's called CFG. The C stands for cultural, the G for genius, and you can all guess what the F stands for.
So again, if anyone has any questions.
Yes. I have, yeah, I've spoken to 3 different shops. One, I will be putting garments into already. We've already kind of discussed price points, which is the hardest kind of approach to these things, is finding the point of, I am going to make a loss because I'm not selling it directly. How much of a loss am I going to make, and how am I going to make it? A lot of the shops I've approached have just gone, we want 50%, and that's not something I, at my current point, can afford. It's simply too expensive, and the other option would be to charge 50% more, which just no one would pay. So I am beginning to. It's still touch and go. I'm finding different shops. Also, I don't want to be in every shop, if that makes sense. I want it to align with my brand. I don't want it to just be like, oh, here you go, here my t-shirts, so I sell them. And it's a pottery shop that focuses on something completely different. I really want to get into an environment where people recognize my brand for what it stands for as well. So I'm looking for like-minded people who own shops that have the same sort of attitude. There's hairdressers on Springbank. It's called Gentleman's Barbers. It's very old style. There's a lot of bikers, for example, that go there, so they're going to let me put wallets and belts and examples of the garments I make in there. Leave some credit cards out, but there's, my business cards look like credit cards. That's why I say credit cards. But yeah, I have. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So I'm starting to organize stalls at biker rallies, mainly. I run two separate lines. So one's very biker focused, so it's actual, like the jacket I'm wearing currently is very high grade biker leather. So this can be worn on a bike. If you come off a bike, you won't get scratched. However, I'm also running a fashion side to the same thing now. With the fashion side, it's more, I'm pushing it online. And with biker market, I'm going out to rallies, I'm meeting bikers, I'm talking to them. And it's often also the fact that there's a generational divide between the fashion conscious market I'm selling to and the practical market I'm selling to. Anyone else? Yes?
In your biography, you mentioned that you're doing children's clothing.
Yes.
Parents with alternative sales.
Yes.
Is anybody else doing that? Because I've never seen that.
Not like we are, to be quite honest. That's why we started it. Because I make alternative garments for adults. Me and my business partner who are doing it together, we just came across the fact that no one does it, and why not? We couldn't understand, because it's something that's for us, because we make everything ourselves, quite easy to make. We make mini-me versions of what we sell to adults for kids, and the parents love it. And we quite honestly haven't really understood why it doesn't exist. There's a few people that are trying to do it, but the issue is the fact that they don't make garments. So they don't understand the difference between an adult's garment and a child's garment. And we also are, with that brand, starting at a much younger age. So 0 to 3 months is where we start with baby clothes with simple prints on. We try to make alternative garments also a bit more funny for the kids, whereas my adult brand is very anarchistic sometimes, it has a lot of loud slogans, really dark imagery. And the kids, it's kind of a fun play on it, kid-like. We've just done a hoodie print instead of ACDC, it says ABCD, that sort of thing. Just little plays on things that are quite popular. Yes?
How are you currently manufacturing garments?
Oh, I have a business partner who was right over there. Just thought I'd point out, embarrass it a little. But we make everything ourselves. So we're both fully trained in making. We both have different fortes. So I work mostly with leather. I've made what I'm wearing today. My business partner made my trousers. It's sort of, we can make anything, so we just make it ourselves. We're really focusing on the quality of what we made rather than trying to find a manufacturer and that sort of things. Because I do know a lot of manufacturers also based in England. However, we pride ourselves on quality, so we don't really want to go and outsource when we know we can finish to the highest standard that there is. I think that was the last question, was it? Yeah, if anybody wants to come play with orcs, just come over and I'll show you on the iPad what you can do. It's really fun, I promise you.
Yeah. Right, and our last speaker is Lee Harris.
Hi, I think I'm hearing all that pretty say out there. I've got this piece of paper as well, so if I keep looking at it, that's why I don't forget to sign everything about the business. So my name's Leah, and my business is I'm a Miss Cleaning Co. So I first started cleaning for when I was a teenager for my mum. She'd like me do chores, she was do a list, clean bedroom, stuff like that around the house. All my friends would be playing out and I'd be the one that's putting the clothes up, cleaning the house for everything. I was feeling generous, like just the bedroom for things like that. I've worked in a few jobs, letting agencies, waitressing, things like that, and most recently I worked for a play group and I dressed up as a mascot, running around like a monkey, and I thought, why am I doing this? When I could be working for myself and being home for my children. So the main reason I wanted to start my own business is for them really. I've got 2 little girls, and I've got a husband who's here to support me today. I wasn't the one there for them picking up from school or at bedtime, so I thought, why not put what I can do, my skill is cleaning, and I do think I and around there, working the hours around them, and works best for my family. So I offer a range of services. We do empty property cleans. At the minute, it's just myself. I've got 15 clients at the minute, but at the beginning, which was only October, I only had 2 clients. But since joining MC40, I've now got 15, and I do 3 days a week at the minute, which when my little girl gets older and she's in full-time school, I've got 5 full days there to play with. And that's just without even reaching out there. That's just a Facebook page I've got and sharing that. I've had lots of friends helping me share on Facebook. I've also got a lot of reviews on my current page from past clients. I used to clean, I've been doing it on and off alongside working. I used to bike there up until I was like 20 weeks pregnant and clean around it. So they've left me reviews as well, which is great. I've not had any bad reviews yet about my cleaning. I am looking to expand at the minute because I've got 15 clients and it's just me. A lot of people want to have this cleaning. It's so popular, I didn't think it'd take off as it has only in a month. So this week I've actually trialled someone. She came and helped me clean a house on Sunday morning at cleaning the house. So I've booked her in this week to help me do my weekly cleans, and we're going to see how that goes. And hopefully, if she's good, she'll take the workload off me, and I can then make space for new clients because they're out there. They're already asking me on Facebook and stuff like that. Yeah. So MC40, I would not be able to do any of this, progress how I have without them. They've learnt me about the tax side of things, doing it all legit properly, not just on the side. So it's a proper business now, and I am my own boss. Current reviews, yeah. I've also, as well as my clients, I've also got a verbal agreement with a letting agency. I used to work for a letting agency as a receptionist, because I've made friends with them. They're giving me their tenancy clean, so if someone moves out, I'm there to clean their house, which is nice of them. And I've had a few of them, which I'm not even being able to fit in on top of my cleans, so that's why I've had to employ someone else. As well as expanding it on staff, I'm hoping to offer carpet cleaning. At the minute, I'm just doing weekly cleans, moving out cleans, stuff like that, one-off deep cleans, but I want to be able to expand and offer carpet cleaning, upholstery cleaning, and window cleaning services, anything that covers the whole cleaning shebang, really. Like I said, I'm on Facebook, so if any of you are interested, I want to read any reviews. I am on there as Amethyst Cleaning Co. With my new logo. I am currently waiting for some business cards, which Chloe as well has designed for me. And that is it. Is that right? I was giving myself a duster, wearing some to my feather duster on that race to get my feather duster out. But yeah, thank you.
So, same thing again, if anybody has any questions.
There's an awful lot of cleaners out there. What sets you aside? What makes you different?
I like to think my customer service stands out. I have a one-to-one relationship, so if someone wants a job, I would go to the house first to meet them and build up a relationship, really. I like to always keep in touch communication with kids after every job I've done. I'm always on the phone saying, is everything okay, stuff like that, and that's how they've left me reviews to get more clients and stuff like that. So also I offer, most people offer hourly rates. It was a bit touch and go whether to do this, but I offer package prices, so I'll do it based on the size of your house and what the job entails, and I've got like a basic package what that covers. Of the 15 clients I've got, I've not had any complaints about my charging per package, really. And that also helps me because I'm quick at cleaning and efficient at cleaning, and they're getting what I've described in their package that I suppose.
What's been your biggest challenge then so far? How did you overcome it and what did you learn from it?
Biggest challenge? I think it's been fitting everything around the children. Obviously because I'm a mum, I only wanted to start part-time work, and this has helped me a lot to fit it around them and not miss anything, but being there as well, because they're my number one, really. And I want to make the business benefit them, but me, and not miss anything. So I'm off after nursery when I've dropped her off, and I'm there to pick up as well. So that's been the biggest challenge of fitting everything and all that.
If you're doing the work around when they're at school and when they're at nursery, what happens when it's the holidays? How do you cope?
I've got a lot of family.
Yeah.
Well, we're doing 3 days at the minute anyway. So yeah, 3 days shared between grandparents. Quite started 1 day a week. Yeah.
So it's volunteering services there.
Why not stairs? How do you get your oil stains out your clothes?
I don't specialise my own cleans, just big house cleans. But I do weekly tips on my Facebook page. Every Monday I'll put a little cleaning tip on there. Just
That's what I'm saying.
yeah, now you can't roll stage it.
You've got some big balls now, we'll go to
I'll try to
As your business expands, you've got holiday camps, caravans, and the actual, you'd have a shield and a cap between
I've not. Well, we did go to like hot tub for the weekend, and it was very disgusting. And I was saying to him, "Have you actually got a cleaning?" Because I don't think he did. But yeah, that'd be great to get my foot in the door into them kind of places. Yeah.
You actually have a written contract with these people. I'm just thinking you're about to employ somebody who might just pop on and steal.
Yeah, no,
Just a thought.
no, just at the minute, just a verbal word of mouth, obviously, just a bit of trust within a friend.
Well, businesses struggle with trust. Just
I've got business insurance to cover my business, if that's what I mean, but I've not got like.
No, I meant that you're going to employ somebody, you have a contract, verbal contract, so you don't have nothing in writing with these people, right?
Yeah.
It is a business after all, it's
Yeah.
not just somebody knocking on the door doing something, right? What's to stop the person you're about to employ saying, what the charge you? I can do it with you.
Yeah. I'm not employing total strangers, so I'd like to think I know them a little bit and trust them to not do stuff like that. But obviously I'm building up a good customer relationship with my customers. I don't think they would do anything like that. Hopefully not.
Hopefully.
Last question. As you expand the business and you employ other people, will you continue managing the personal customer relations, or will you let the actual
No, I take care of that now. So the new job that my new cleaner's going to be doing this week, I've been I've met the customer, the client, and I've explained everything that's going to be involved. And I've explained the new cleaner that I've come in, and then I've gone and met them again with the new cleaner. So I'm always going to be like in charge, head of my things.
Can we get another massive round of applause for all three pictures? Right, so we are going to take 5 minutes, just really quickly to go and judge the three pictures. In that meantime, one of the parts of the hook-up dinner is to hook up new and starting businesses with people that can potentially help them. So in these 5 minutes whilst we're judging, I'd like to try and, if you're a business or if you're someone that could offer skills or services to these three people that are starting out a business, please come and speak to them and try and help them. But yeah, we'll be back in like 5 minutes.
Your employees should tie you in and you can't pick that.
Yes, the thing is, the idea of the on contract with your employer, but we you cannot set up cleaning businesses in that area.
I would be creating something like that.
Yeah, they will not have anything. And that's what they say to you, that you don't have my job. Yes. What's she thinking of first? No, on the third. I think anybody would probably need that little space. Yeah.
Then it's like, then
I'm not very well. I'm genuinely not very well. The first guy. Yeah.
So you see that, I
Maybe he doesn't know about that.
Adam Dixon, mentoring.
What tell him?
What tell him? I mean, I don't know how much time he's doing I'm just trying to get off the ground. You come there all like, you look for your succeed. And it's actually really something what I'm trying to do. And I think you need people around you that most businesses around you. Trying to
It tastes good, but I'm going to enjoy the seeds today. I can make it in a hurry, I can make it out of nothing that's in the fridge. Yeah, me too. Great, but won't do that. I think that's what people want.
Chocoholic.
I hope he gets that off me. Yeah, but if he hasn't asked next time. I don't mind. Are always sending you free monitors because they want to know right the bits that go in them. Remember that you put your blood on to measure them because that's what they measure. So they give you information whatever you measure your sugar, and then you can use doctors and things to go in it. So the doctor says, no, you're not having it. You go back to your old one. That's the idea, is that you've got to make your doctor right away. My own way, and they're more expensive than just their small things. If you look at his feet, so that's it, that's the final last point I'm on.
Right guys, third one I'd like to calm down just for a second. I'm going to hand the microphone over to sort of introduce announce the winners.
Yeah, it was really difficult, as you can imagine, and I think they all deserve another round of applause for us, because it's fantastic. Yeah, so I've been asked to give a little bit of feedback. There were 4 of us judging, and I say it was very, very difficult. I felt overall that Robin business has got a great deal of potential. He's obviously very passionate about fashion. We thought should have mentioned Chloe a bit earlier on, if you like, and the fact that working as a partnership, as a business and a kind of partnership. and we weren't altogether clear in terms of all of the different income streams that he could get from what is clearly high quality, but it's a brilliant presentation, very, very good indeed. Samuel, well, he's going to make a difference with that. I mean, that's diabetes app could be absolutely great. It's got a fantastic opportunity. He obviously believes in it a great deal, and so that came through, and it's in his sector, really. It's the kind of thing he does. The thing that, as a business, because remember, we're judging it as a business in whole, is that we weren't sure about income stream. We're just not sure about the subscription service, about, you know, it needs some testing, that's all I can say. You're not at that point where you're just quite convinced the judges that we've actually got it. But it's great, and it will be successful, I promise you. The last one was Leah, and Leah's presentation was from the heart. It made sense to us in terms of practicality, working around children. It's kind of the bootstrap or building yourself, and it was just great. We thoroughly enjoyed that. We understood how it could grow, and we also understood that because quality is so important from that presentation, that the way it will grow, it will still keep the quality in it. So as a result of all that feedback, hope it's helpful, that's how we felt it. As a result of that, it was such a difficult decision that what we've decided to do is give Robin and Chloe and Samuel £100 each to help with their business as a result. So, and the other thing is our cooking is for women in Scarborough, and there's a white chocolate and a milk chocolate and 2 sticks of rocks as well. So we can share that amongst you, so that's good. So the winner is, and to rapturous applause from everybody, is Leah with £250. And you get a little good business humour from me, and you get a stick of rock as well. So there we go. Thank you very much indeed. And Juliet, and we're taking the out picture too. How do you feel about all this?
Overwhelmed.
So, presenting with the check.
And the judges say thank you for the free cleaning you're going to do for them. That's the deal that he struck with us.
Right, thank you very much.
That's the end of the night, guys. Thank you very much for coming, and I hope you've all had a wonderful night. Again, if you feel like you could offer services to any of the 3 people that pitched, please go and speak to them. But yeah, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the night. Thank you.
That never happened, Joe. That's never happened. You must have thought, I'm with Joe, I better fasten my bag. Yeah, she must have thought. You too. Enjoy your time.
Right, Joe, don't forget your cup.
Get my coat. I've got a bag up. Can I have my handbag as well? It's mine. That's me. Biggest bag there is, that's me. You've got your cup?
In my bag. Do you know what? I need to tidy my bag. It is an absolute wrong size. It really is. I will have had it because I locked it. So I've just got to find it. Somewhere. It's honestly. There it is. Got it. Somebody called me, let me just see who it was. Called me.
The whole city called you.
Yeah.
Very popular. That's going a bit far, isn't it?
Not random.
I mean, I'm going to be
Yeah, that's how I'm alright. Oh, that was not me.
Oh, I'm gonna go Wiggles and it's quite Wow.